Citizen 12 is brought to you by Complexify, a social purpose corporation founded to support you living in alignment with your conscience and discerning what that is. Find out more at complexify.org. complexiphy.org.
My name is Paige Hulsey.
And my name is Emily Bogen.
And this is episode 3 of the Citizen 12 podcast. Citizen 12 is made by and for people interested in the practical application of spiritual principles as outlined in our steps, inspired by Alcoholics Anonymous. This is not a program or health treatment, but an inclusive place, common ground to share and learn. If you haven't yet listened to episode 0, we invite you to do that, and you'll get a good sense of what the show is all about and hear our steps, which can also be found through any of our sites. Before we really dig in, our podcast is created in Seattle, Washington. We acknowledge this as Duwamish land and strive to honor the past, present, and future Indigenous lives here. Citizen 12 supports Duwamish tribal services by paying real rent. Find out more at realrentduwamish.org. The topic of today's show is feelings. Feelings. I have a little bit more of a script to read, but I want to acknowledge before that even in the preparation for this show that Emily and I do, we had maybe, I don't know if surprising is the right word, we definitely have had some feelings come up in a way different than ordinarily, and not bad. I mean, I guess I'll acknowledge today, just in the preparation for the show, we both felt some sadness. We had some old pain come up. And then before we started recording, we both were present to feeling some gratitude and connection. But we, just talking about feelings, I think and as you'll hear in the show, we just maybe are more awake to how we're feeling, which we're going to say is probably a good thing.
Yeah.
So back to my little script, what I wrote is, there was a time when I would have been absolutely shocked to learn that I would want to be talking and thinking about feelings. And so if you're in that boat, I feel you there. If you need a little more information about why we think it's critical to address feelings, this bit is for you. While some people may have a mature relationship to their own and others' feelings, I have not always, and that appears to be true to some extent for almost maybe all of the people we have met who are interested in practicing this spiritual path. Part of that is that some of the struggles that led to our pursuit of a spiritual approach included struggles with feelings. Also today, we're mostly going to talk about only a couple of particular feelings, namely hurt and angry. Those have been so much more complicated than our feelings of being satisfied or connected or grateful or whatever. Before we dive further into talking about feeling feelings, we're going to first talk about feelings unfelt, or as I think of it, as dam building. And I'm going to acknowledge that I have a little bit of congestion, not just from some tears that I had earlier, but maybe some cold symptoms. So I apologize if my voice doesn't sound quite normal. But dam building. So my reflex reaction to hurt, even now, is commonly to sort of pretend it away in the moment or suppress it, or how I think of it is as shoving the feeling behind a dam. And this appears to be really common. this
yeah.
way of responding to feelings, especially the feeling of being hurt. So we're going to talk first about why do we do that? And first of all, it seemed important to say that it seems to be kind of how we're enculturated.
Absolutely.
Like we're taught not to actually feel whatever feelings we're feeling, but to, I don't know, how would you even say it? Not just postpone. It's just like not have them.
Mm-hmm.
I guess generally it does seem like the message in the world is mostly don't have feelings.
Don't have them. Don't give any attention to them. There's a lot of different ways that I think our culture teaches us that.
They're generally that they're bad, undesirable, problematic,
dangerous. Don't
even.
trust them. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And that brings up, I've heard a lot of people, and there was maybe even a time for myself when I had a fear, and I heard somebody report this not that long ago. If they started feeling their feelings, they would just take them over, and it would never end, and they would be like locked away or die.
Well, that's the nature of the dam, and I think that's how our society gets away with the reputation it's given feelings, because we are taught to stuff them down. And so when someone maybe does break, or the dam breaks, there is an instance of maybe responding overboard.
Okay.
And that gives a bad reputation, I think, to feelings.
This might sound funny to say, but I've never seen people or known of people to be, let's say, committed because they're actually feeling their feelings.
Right.
In my experience, way more common that people get into need inpatient care because they aren't feeling feelings.
Yeah.
So it just recently registered to me how kind of goofy that fear of being committed because we're going to be so sad that we never recover. I've never seen I've never observed. I'm not saying it couldn't ever happen, but I've never observed anything like that.
Not in myself, not in others. No.
Same.
And I do want to just address that, like, when we were, starting this show up, I thought to myself, like, what are people going to think about this show about feelings? This is such a tender place that we're going. This is a tender podcast. And I remember you telling me about how when you had noticed yourself become tenderized months ago, maybe years ago, I forget, but this is like warning. This is a tenderized place that we inhabit. And if that's not for you, that's okay.
Yeah.
But
this is for anybody who wants to spend some time hearing about experience of having been tenderized.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. So another, other than just our culture enculturation about not feeling feelings, there has been a reality for both of us that there were times and places and people where it wasn't actually safe to feel how we were feeling in the moment of having the feeling. And of course this is true under all kinds of circumstances where it's not, discerning where it's safe and appropriate to have feelings and where isn't is a difficult conversation, complicated, and probably for another day.
Yeah.
But we want to acknowledge that there is a reality to their times and places where it is not safe or appropriate to have feelings.
Right.
I want to say Emily and I are both very grateful that by and large our lives, we don't have a lot of that in our lives. We actually have lives where day to day we have the safety and security, the durability in our relationships, the structures for communication and honesty and all kinds of things that makes it so we have a lot of time where it is safe and appropriate to be able to have whatever feelings we're having. That wasn't always true for either of us.
No. And it's not our choosing, growing up in educational institutions and, being forced into jobs that didn't allow that. And, the list goes on.
Yep. So another reason we have noticed for damming feelings is that it seems like there's too much water, is how I'm going to say it. And this might be related to it not being safe. being in situations, environments, or relationships, or both, where there is so much inflammatory happenings.
Mm-hmm.
That's a funny way of saying it.
Mm-hmm.
But whether that's violence, we'll just go with violence. If that's violence, understandably, there's going to be so much pain that it doesn't work to just feel all that all the time, especially while you're still being hurt.
Right.
And we both have had times in our lives, circumstances where that's been the case.
Mm-hmm.
So we're naming these categories, these areas, in part just to help people be able to identify that these are things that are shared. These are common experiences that we have. I see these things be true for people. Mm-hmm. None of us are alone in having responded to our feelings or our environments in these ways. I think that's really important. So it's not like to glamorize, staying in environments where you're in so much pain that you can't feel feelings. Obviously, that sounds terrible.
Yeah.
And it's been a complicated journey for me to, I guess to some extent, there had to come a time where I had to get interested in living a life where I wasn't getting hurt so much that maybe I could even feel all my feelings.
Right.
And then I'm going to make a note about what I think of as delayed. Now I think of as delayed processing of feelings, which I think might be a little bit different than just the damning of the feelings. We'll talk about this more in the show, but I now really live with this commitment to not damming up my feelings, but to actually feeling them as closely to when they're happening as I can. And there have been pains that took decades for me to feel any pain from. So, actually, there was some pain recently that I felt that was from something that happened in 2011. So that's 7 years. And it's not that I had never thought about the incident. It's not that, everything seemed great about it, but literally the feelings from what happened just did not arise for me until just maybe within the last couple of months. And I'm happy to say, again, we'll talk about this more later, but the feeling of that was somewhat brief. The feeling arose. I talked about it. I felt, I spent some time letting myself feel that pain, whatever pain was there, and then it subsided. But I really relate to not even having access to feeling something while it's happening. And I heard, I recently listened to The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker, who talks about growing up in an abusive home, and it was never really safe or appropriate for him to be in the moment. He was always either kind of rehashing something that had already happened to try to figure out how he could do better next time, or he was trying to predict what was going to happen in the future to try to manipulate and prevent problems. And I don't remember if he identified it as delay. I don't know if he totally connected it to this delayed emotion thing, but I see that this is a thing that happens for us, that many of us are in very bad practice at. In fact, I can hardly think of any examples of people I know who, get hurt and in the moment say, ow, I'm hurt, that's hurting me, and then feel that pain. Or no. Does that make sense?
I don't think that's that common, no.
Yeah.
And it can be really confusing if you are somebody that needs to understand things in a very cause and effect sort of way. When there's a lapse in time, you can start to become lost. I can start to become lost. And especially if you're someone who really tries to understand the source of things and.
So if sadness comes up and then you're like, well, wait, why am I sad?
Where is this coming from? And you can get really, that can make it worse, I think. And but what you're describing is sort of whenever I feel, and maybe I do identify that it's from an old pain, and I think I do have this insight as to where it's coming from, but I'm also kind of getting this idea that maybe there's some things to let go of in that process, and like trying to connect all the dots and understand where it's all coming from.
So now we're going to talk about some of what we've identified as the consequences of having dammed up feelings, living with feelings that have been dammed up and not felt fully or very much. So the first thing that we notice about this, having been people who have done this, is that there's a good deal of numbness associated with damming. Unsurprisingly, right? Because if I don't go ahead and feel the feeling and I shove it away, then what is left? Well, there's like a vacuum. And for me, that has really been numbness. And then there's subsequent, what I think of as boredom. Being numb is actually kind of boring, especially, and it's funny to say as somebody who has pursued numbness pretty intensely in my life. I have pursued numbness. I would never have said I was pursuing boredom, but I can now see that was a consequence of spending time numb. And then there's all the consequences of that artificial boredom, which for me have been, I guess I'm going to use the terminology, and we've done it before, but I'm going to do it again, acknowledge that language is just so limited here, and we just have the words we have to try to talk about this. So I hope people will bear with us as we try to get to what we're trying to communicate here. But act out. So out of this artificial boredom from the numbness, that to feel something, I have acted out, made excitement. I guess we call that being dramatic. I mean, I guess we have a lot of ways of talking about it, but I don't really see that it gets tied to this numbness thing because, well, probably because that's quite threatening. It's really it would be a really big deal to, it's a way bigger deal to try to deal with our damming of feelings, original feelings and what happened, than to just brush it off as being dramatic or something. For me, there are these layers underneath that.
Right. This reminds me a lot of, it just is very much congruent with, I'm reading Women Who Run with the Wolves, and it is really reminding me of that. I won't go into it, but
I don't know that book.
Just sort of numbing your feelings, numbing, instinct that kind of comes up from within, feelings, but also in this book, it's there, the spirit, like the spirit of the self, I guess. That's how they sort of talk about it, but just how it can create that numbness and that sort of, it can feel like you're sort of in a cage with no doors. I remember feeling that way like several years ago, that boredom, and it kind of felt a little bit more like a depression actually, but I just remember that, and it is very real. And then of course wanting to sort of create more stimulation in that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Natural. It looks like all of us are, seeking stimulus appears to be this kind of natural common thing that we all have a need for. So another consequence of having dammed up feelings, we talk about kind of being confusion about who we even are. And I don't know how much people will relate to this, but I can say for sure that I have witnessed many people beginning a spiritual journey like this who come up to a point where they go, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I like. I don't know what matters to me. I don't know what I've been about. I don't know what I don't know what I'm about. I don't know who I am. And to some people that might seem really extreme, and as I'm saying it, it sounds extreme to me. Like that's pretty intense. And especially for me now, because I feel quite really connected to who I feel that I am and what matters to me and what I care about. I know with certainty that was not always the case. And I had never tied it to having dammed up my feelings. But now it looks related. It looks like part of why I didn't know who I was that I wasn't being myself, and part of being myself was having whatever actual feelings I was having.
Right. Living in a time where I feel like we're being asked by other women and allies to sort of speak up as women, you know, the voices of women, and feeling inspired to do that. I felt like I'm going to speak up my voice. I'm going to say who I am, and I'm going to say what I think and what I feel. And then there's that, but who am I? I don't know. Or what do I feel? What do I want to say? And that was a strange moment, realizing that.
This is the consequence of damning that I think about the most and identify with other people the most, is just sheer exhaustion. That there's only so much we can shove behind a dam. It takes so much effort to maintain. And I know we're still talking about this metaphorically, and we'll talk, we didn't even really plan to talk about what this looks like on the actual court, like what we have to do to build dams. I guess that was an oversight in my planning, because for me, it takes energy and effort and behavior and structures to support not feeling feelings. It's not the no effort way. It actually takes effort,
right? It's
to
not natural.
That word can be complicated, so I try to avoid it. But it does seem, the natural thing to do with feelings seems to be to just feel them. And it appears to, and in my experience, takes a good deal of stuff to keep the dam in place. And doing that is very tiring, aside from all these other consequences. I guess for me, those consequences were like, I was able to pay those. It was the exhaustion that really got to me, that incentivized me to be interested in another way. And yes, that is definitely my experience, that feeling whatever feelings I'm having as they come, way less effort and complication and weird side effects than artificially damming them up, or getting stuck in a cycle of artificially damming them up when it's not necessary. Maybe that's a good way of saying it.
Desensitization and disconnect.
Oh, yes. Good. Right. So, so unsurprisingly, another consequence of having our own feelings dammed up has been for us noticing that we are desensitized to other people's feelings, and of course then disconnected from them. And there might be many reasons for feeling and being desensitized and disconnected from other people. Having not a very mature relationship to my own feelings is an access to connection with other people that is useful for me. So, that we live in a culture that desensitizes us to each other, or that there's that we know a million people, through social networks or whatever, and we're exposed to so much pain, that kind of desensitization. I don't know how much personal access I have to change that. But knowing that me not feeling my own feelings contributes to that disconnection, that's actually something I have an opportunity to do something about, which is why I want to be talking about it and thinking about it. And, we're not even now talking about having had progress or headway through some of these consequences through practices of undamming. But we still wanted to acknowledge that we see that being disconnected from other people is like a symptom of having not living in a practice of feeling feelings.
Right. And then there's so much more that people have written or researched about, the consequences of damning feelings. People speculate cancer can be an outcome, any sort of mental illnesses. There's a lot of theory and, good evidence that this is not just about, feeling disconnected or numb or depressed, like a little bit depressed or melancholy, it could have, much grander effects.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, and how could it not if it serves to exhaust us and disconnect us from the people around us or the clues in our lives about how we need to be living? Of course, we could be badly derailed.
Right. Makes sense.
So now we're going to talk about what I mean in this conversation we're calling undamming, if that makes sense. So like letting those dams down. And I guess I don't think of it as one big dam. I think of it as like a dam each time a thing happens.
Oh, gosh.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a million little dams.
That's a lot of weight.
Yes, tiring to maintain. So in terms of undamming, unsurprisingly, the first component I think of as like giving up some of those tools that I've used to do damming.
Right.
And very obviously a first one would be like using substances. And, we haven't talked about substance use on this show before, I don't think. And I want to be very clear. I'm not all substance use is used for damming. That would be goofy. But I can definitely report that I have used substances to support me maintaining dams.
Right.
I know this is a goofy way of talking about this, but I do think it's important for us to connect over these things, and I don't really know how else to talk about it.
It's nice to have a visual image, I think.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So for, coming to be people who got interested in giving up some of those tools, took lots of different things. But both Emily and I are people who have actually surrendered use of some of those tools, use of substances, and even behaviors.
Yes. And at the time, it wasn't me saying, I want to undam, so I'm going to stop drinking or, whatever I was doing.
That'd be so funny.
It was kind of just like, I don't feel like myself. And I think that was like the grander sort of vibe that I was getting. And come to find out later that getting rid of those tools, substance abuse, substances, not even substance abuse, it can just be food, or coffee or whatever.
Or turning on a TV or playing a game on a phone or,
Gosh, yeah.
Or, reading a magazine. Really I say it pretty frequently. It seems like any tool can be misused.
Gosh, that reminds me of something.
What?
Oh my gosh. So when I was 16, I moved to Japan and I fell into a really weird depression. It was the first time I'd ever been depressed. I didn't know what it was, but I remember feeling so different and not good that I didn't even want to tell my family or anyone I knew because I didn't want to infect them with it.
Oh.
It was so bad. I remember, so what I did, I had this plan. I was like, I'm going to read a bunch of gossip magazines and listen to shitty pop music because it's superficial and try to bring myself, it was my first dams. Probably not my first, but that was me intentionally not really realizing it, but finding ways out of this tsunami of a feeling that I'd never felt. And then I remember saying, I'm going to get my heart broken because that kind of pain would be worse or better than this kind of pain.
Talk about problematic, doing weird problematic things.
Oh, but it's just
so normal and common.
Yes, we do that.
We do that. And so, again, it's not that, there is a place and time for maybe some distraction.
Yes.
And ultimately that reading gossip magazines probably wasn't a real answer to whatever was really going on with you. No. I don't even know now if you have kind of unhooked whatever was really going on there.
No idea.
Right. So substances obviously are a common tool that people use to help not feel feelings.
Anything can be a substance, as we've
as we just said.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've told you this before. So when I was in college, which for our listeners, I only just graduated with my undergraduate degree last summer. But through school, as a person who has given up a lot of, I have been striving to give up all harmful tools for years. But when it would be really crunch time, like before finals week, my husband would note that I was panic napping. That's what he called it, which is such a funny term.
It is really funny.
And still really like taking a nap may be a tool of damning feelings. It is definitely like the gentlest tool that I have held on to. But the point here really is that anything can be used as a tool. And Emily and I are both people who actually have, made long-term commitments to give up some of those tools, like using substances.
Right. And important to note that it's not that we think we should be fully, like, I know that some feelings are dangerous. Full exposure right away is not safe for some people, especially with like trauma.
Yeah.
But so I don't think the message here is to get rid of all the dams right away, burn them, feel it all. But,
no,
I think we are kind of
like, we're of the mind to follow our conscience and to take this gently and to do it in community and with people you trust. And yes, this is not an instruction to never distract yourself or soften feelings or whatever. But acknowledging that part of the process of becoming more connected to our feelings has been to not put up so many dams. Big deal. And actually, during our break, Emily was saying that she can see that even analyzing a problem is a way of distancing and not feeling the feelings of whatever's going on. Yeah. And I think that's very insightful. I very much relate. And it's a real discipline to, when I notice I'm talking to myself in my mind about something rather than feeling a feeling about it, to redirect. And for me, and we're going to talk about alternatives here to dams in a moment, but so whether that means actually taking the time to feel whatever might really be there, or just getting on with whatever else needed to be have my attention, has taken discipline, but is a thing that really has changed in my life.
So when you say that, does that mean that when you're to feel your feelings, because I mean like I'm going to say a big word here. Okay. The phenomenological experience of feeling your feelings. We say it like we know what we're talking about, but like you said, you try to remove the dialogue in your brain that's like trying to explain what the feelings are or whatever. So when you're feeling because I'm not an expert at feeling my feelings, I'm actually wondering like, what does it mean for you to feel your feelings? Like,
okay, this is great. So I so want to answer the question, and then I also want to say that I thank you for saying we're not experts at feeling our feelings. We are still very much learning all about these things. I am 38 years old. I have had stunted development in some ways. I've had rapid development in other ways. We are not experts. Even with our educations, respective educations and experiences, we are still very much exploring. And that's part of why we are doing this show, is to open the circle of that exploration so that more of us can be talking about growing through this stuff together.
Yeah.
Okay, so the answer to the question, I'm going to use something that already happened between us today. Okay. So for our listeners, Emily and I were talking about a time when we weren't very close, and Emily was talking about some of the reasons for that distance in our friendship. And
you're welcome to share that if you want.
Well, I don't even know if there's particularly a way. Okay. Or do you want to say something about it?
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Paige is somebody who...
Now I'm scared. Okay. Now I feel scared.
I have felt that Paige can see right through me. Not in a dangerous way, but in a way that's like, it highlights what I'm hiding. It has highlighted the sneaky ways that I live my life. And it's been, you know, when I knew that there were things that I myself couldn't be honest about, what it felt like being with her was basically just, I felt like a little sneak. I felt like, and it was hard. No one wants to feel that way.
No.
So why not hang out with people that don't notice it?
And stay away from that horrible lady Paige.
Yeah, but it was never like, I never got the sense that you were, you know, you wanted me to, you know, admit my sins so that we could, you know, punish me. But anyways, I was telling Paige earlier that when I finally got honest with myself about this big thing, which I've talked about in the past, which was just noticing that I shouldn't have been in a relationship that I was in, and left it, I felt like I think I made a point to like text you or something, and I came over and it was gone. You know, I felt like I could look you in the face and we could be together and finally be close in a way that I'd always wanted to be. So that's what I told Paige.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm moved again hearing it. But the point of us talking about it on the air was to say that when Emily was reporting this story to me earlier today, I felt sad. I noticed, and I again have some tears, but I started to feel the pain of not only the separation that Emily and I had in our friendship, but some of the pain of that I've had this dynamic with many other relationships in my life, friends and family. I don't totally have my hands around what this means about me as a person or even what to call it particularly. Some people think of it as like being kind of no bullshit. Yeah. But my relationship with Emily isn't the only one that has been delayed or, removed really because people don't want to deal with themselves with me or something. And that's been painful. It has been painful. I mean, it has been lonely and sad. And I want to tell the truth about that. So when Emily told me this earlier, I just let the feeling come up. So I noticed, I mean, it wasn't cognitive, but like I started to feel sad and I just felt sad right there and then in the moment. I didn't like dam it up. I didn't say, well, I shouldn't feel sad. I'll do that later. Or that's private or I shouldn't be crying. I just cried the tears that were there to cry and I felt what it was. And I said, actually, I feel that pain of having not had our friendship and it subsided pretty quickly. Did that answer your question about feeling what it is to feel the feeling? So that's what in the moment feeling a feeling is like for me right now today. Okay. You weren't asking about feeling old feelings, I don't think, but maybe now.
Is that different? Feeling old feelings?
I guess it was, I mean, with this pain that I was talking about from 8 years ago, it wasn't really different. It was like, it just, the kind of a reminder. Well, that's complicated. I was having thoughts about the incident that had happened and with not feelings. And then, I don't know, there were just feelings about them. Pain feelings about the incident. And so in that moment that the feeling did arise, I just made space for it and cried the tears. And actually, I had a lot of tears. I felt a pretty intense, deep pain in a way that I haven't for quite a while. And again, this incident, I had never really, and now I feel like I'm being so vague about it. But it is a hairy one. So I guess I'll say very briefly, I had hooked up with somebody and we'd hooked up before, romantic, sexual, and on this occasion, I now looking back see that I was so exhausted and otherwise consumed that I wasn't really capable of consenting to what we did. I was there. I invited this person to come see me. I did not say, no, I don't want to do this. Now, though, the pain has been like it was not consensual. The pain that I just have felt recently was very much like the pain of having had sexual contact that was not consensual. And the confusion had been that I really had thought that I had consented until just really recently. It's only been very recent that it became clear to me that I had not actually been available to consent.
Right.
And this is intimate stuff, and we didn't really give our listeners any warning about hearing about this. So I hope we've done it in a way that's delicate enough, and that people will use us and use the resources they have if this conversation arises old pain. We have resources, victim advocacy resources that we can offer people if they're interested, and we advise using those. We are both advocates of using resources. And I am using the resources that I have needed to address non-consensual sexual experiences and the pain associated with them. So I was trying to say...
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. More than about the event that I had felt new pain about, but that when the pain came, which was just recently from this old thing, pretty much as soon as it arose, I made the space to feel the feelings. So I didn't say, oh, I don't have time to feel angry now, or my husband wouldn't understand, or I don't know, any of the kind of cognitive thoughts I could tell myself to delay feeling the feeling. I really live in this commitment to feel whatever feelings as they arise.
Right. That answers my question.
Yeah. That was a lot.
It's a lot like what you said about earlier when we were discussing the show about feelings, kind of like how children express them. One moment they can be just bawling their eyes out, and then 5 seconds later, the happiest they've ever been.
So you're just doing a sneak peek of a bit later in the show, but let's just talk about it now. So I also, I commonly find myself reminding people or asking people to consider if they've ever observed a child, like a toddler or an infant even, have feelings. They're in pain one moment for whatever reason, and they're crying and upset and in pain, and then it concludes. Right. The pain concludes, the feelings subside, and in a moment they can be giggling and excited by a balloon or whatever it is. That with children, feelings just come and go very, very easily, and it seems to me that it's all of the attempt to manage the feelings in large part that is very complicated and makes for a lot of other problems. And that's kind of like weather, I don't know if that really makes sense here, but feelings coming and going, and not necessarily having totally explicitly clear origins or circumstantial reasons for them. It's like sometimes it's raining outside and I don't totally understand the hydrological system. Is just raining, and then in the next moment it's sunny. And sometimes it feels that way with my feelings too. Right. Sometimes I just feel sad, and sometimes I feel happy, and I'm not sure. It's much more personal. Sometimes more personal or more meaningful than just whatever the weather is. Right.
Well, people do say, I know that depth psychologists say that there's a collective unconscious, and sometimes we're not feeling our feelings. We're feeling the pain of the earth or the world or the people.
And actually trying to do that, jumping from just feeling whatever we're feeling to trying to analyze or understand can contribute to dams. Right. And is for me now an invitation back to just feeling whatever I'm feeling. I haven't actually found it too dangerous or problematic to just feel whatever I'm feeling until it subsides.
And figuring it out, I can't say is something that I find to be a necessity.
Yeah, we usually say there's no cheese down that tunnel. Figuring it out, it's the booby prize. Right. What does that lead to? Intimacy or fulfillment? I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. It hasn't much for me. So back to this process of undamming. And we wanted to talk a little bit about structures for undamming, and fundamentally we both view the steps especially the 4th step through the 12th step, as explicitly tool structure for undamming old feelings. Obviously, for for people who are familiar with the steps, they very much are designed to help us unclog old dams and live without making new dams.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And then there's, we kind of agree, all therapeutic work, and even other things, like really, if you have the intention of undamming anything, we were saying even like a massage can be a way of undamming old stuff.
Absolutely.
And then part of this, again, is this living with a commitment to not dam and to feel our feelings as they arise. So now we're going to talk a little bit about alternatives to building dams and what it looks like to feel our feelings, even though I still feel goofy calling it that, feeling our feelings.
Well, that's not a very beloved word, feelings. We've said feelings a lot. We've said pain a lot.
Oh, people don't like these things?
I just don't, and I don't even think they're cool, which is also another thing. It's like, and obviously that's a superficial reason that stems from probably all of the, training we've had to not feel our feelings and all the fear of feeling our feelings. But it's not popular.
That's a good point.
It's not popular to talk about feelings.
Nope, it's not. Not in our circles anyway.
No.
So but if you're still on board with feeling your feelings,
if you're still here,
actually learning how to identify what we're feeling, and sometimes even naming it has really been part of that deal. And then along those lines, for both of us, it has come to there's some deal about communicating what we're feeling to those around us.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's
a big one, and we'll come back to that probably in our follow-up show.
Yeah.
Because there's complication with that. But both of us, in the spirit of connection and being ourselves and being honest, practicing honesty and transparency, it has included sharing our feelings for us.
Yes.
And maybe sometimes even ideally for me, at least, sharing what I'm feeling while I'm feeling it. For me, it was very powerful this morning, even though it was kind of a small thing, to feel some pain and sadness and be able to say, I feel sad and I feel that pain, and share that with Emily. And actually, today, it seems like communicating about it supports it subsiding. So not that I told you about it to make it go away.
Right.
But that part of the natural thing is to just let it arise, feel it, share what it is, and that's part of it subsiding. That sometimes maybe not communicating about it supports things getting stuck.
Yes. Okay. I would say that's my experience.
And then the last alternative that we thought we'd talk about is what we've been describing all show, really actually honoring, making time and space for the feelings. And sometimes, when they're more intense, that actually takes a little more effort or, intention to block off some time on the calendar, get the tissues, wear something cozy, and let myself feel whatever I'm feeling. I mean, I'm going to say, fortunately, most feelings I have these days don't require that much structure around them. But it does take some intention to make space. It's pretty easy in today's world to just go from thing to thing and never feel anything.
Oh, yeah. You can just put a show on. You can call someone. You can scroll through Instagram. You can think about why you're stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of
back
things
to tools of right. Yes. So the converse would be to actually honor what we're feeling and let ourselves feel what we're feeling.
Honor is a good word. It gives respect to feelings, which I think that they are in need of. Yeah.
If it isn't already clear, I kind of thought we would talk now about, well, why even bother with all this feeling stuff? I think we've pitched it pretty well already.
Hopefully.
I hope. But part of why I've bothered with this feeling business and why I want to bother with it for other people, oh my gosh, I just thought of how a friend told me something so terrible not that long ago that, I feel kind of funny saying this, but I think it's important for people to hear. She was saying she's in a newish relationship, and that anytime she noticed she was starting to have any feeling, and I think really she was talking about sadness, she just was like instantly trying to do stuff to make it go away. And she suspected this was probably not very healthy. And she, you know, she's not somebody who's on this spiritual path. I mean, my heart broke, and it was actually part of my incentive for wanting to write a show like this. I see in my community that people are having difficulty with feelings. That looks exhausting to me for her in her life. That's not what I want for her. I want for her to be able to, if she's sad, feel sad.
Wow. I want to take a note that maybe next time we'll talk about that maybe it makes people feel powerful because feelings are so powerful to be able to control them.
That's good. Yeah, we'll make note of that. But part of why we bother is that feelings appear to just very much be a part of life.
Right.
Like inextricable. I don't know anybody who really does not have feelings and is alive or having like a real life. And actually for both of us, we have found that through this journey, this, you know, different experience of our feelings, is that feelings can be kind of interesting and even sometimes enjoyable, that they do add spice to life, that they are not always bad. Even pain has been useful, productive, interesting, and has provided grounds for connection for us.
Mm-hmm. What doesn't feel good is that dull, anxious feeling that I think is like the layer over the feelings.
Agreed.
So
yeah, numbness, anxiety. Yes,
I understand wanting to get away from that.
I do too.
Anxiety is not fun.
Agreed. And maybe we should talk more about anxiety sometime too.
Yeah.
I mean, there are lots of things that I think we think of as feelings, and sometimes I think maybe actually are something else.
I think they are something else. I do. I'd much rather feel sad or angry than anxious, and I think that that's available. At least it has been for me.
Same. Yay. I'm glad we can talk about that. And then there's, again, that this is still very much unfolding, and we want to invite our listeners, if you have had some, you know, new experience of your own feelings, you were a person who didn't do feelings and now you have some feelings, do some feeling, and it's good for you or bad or whatever you want to share with us, we would love to hear from you. Yeah. We would love to hear from our listeners. Okay, so our last little section of today's show, we're going to come back to, and maybe this will be a recurring feature, but sort of hang-ups and pitfalls about what we've been talking about. And one key one I think is important is this distinction between feeling, we're going to use anger here, but so feeling angry and being angry. And I don't hear people talk about this ever really, but this was a critical thing for me to kind of come to in life, that there is very much a difference between me feeling angry and me being angry. So my example is that it turns out that I can feel angry and proceed with the pre-existing course of action for my day, rather than maybe like feeling angry, being angry, and then determining that yelling or being mean or being punishing is what should be added to my agenda. That, for me, that's being angry. I have come to be really disinterested in being angry. I mean, in alignment with me not wanting to cause harm. Yeah. And for me, these days, being mean, being punishing have been harmful. Totally a distinct thing than just feeling angry. And, you know, when asked about, well, what does that feel like? It's been an exploration for me to learn, how do I just feel angry? You know, it is different than sad. I guess I was talking about sad when I was saying, you know, sit somewhere comfy and wear some cozy clothes and get the tissues. Letting myself feel angry has been different. And I'm way more tempted. This is interesting. I don't know if I'd really noticed this before, but when I'm angry, I'm way more tempted to talk to myself about why I'm angry and what happened and what should happen now. I'm in a practice where I don't really engage in that inside of other feelings, but the pull is much stronger for me with anger. So when I'm angry, I wanted to take new actions. And because I have a third step practice where when I get up in the morning, I surrender to my conscience, not my feelings, it doesn't really work to feel angry and then now decide to do new things. That'd be like surrendering to my anger. So that seems like a big, important key.
Yeah.
The next hang up or pitfall would be like pursuing particular feelings. So really today we've talked about avoiding feelings, but at the same time, over pursuit of one particular feeling, like elation. We talk a lot about happiness. I think often what people mean by happiness is actually elation,
Yes.
which is a different thing.
Yes.
And I'm not a particularly good person for talking about this because I have spent most of my life avoiding particular feelings rather than pursuing other feelings. But I am familiar with that many people find themselves trapped in problematic cycles of pursuing, let's say, elation.
Yes.
And that to me, this seems as goofy and problematic as pursuing a particular kind of weather.
Yes.
I mean, you know, like demanding that it be raining all the time would be pretty goofy.
Right.
I know I live in Seattle, but even so, it would be goofy to demand that. Not realistic, not feasible. Similarly, it would be, in my experience, goofy to think I'm going to feel any one particular feeling forever, all the time.
Yeah. Talk about not being present at all. Like,
Good point.
Being in a room, having been someone who's done both of those things, but now having the experience of, being in relationships with people who are pursuing feelings, those, like, how ignored do me in the moment feel,
Disconnect.
Like,
another
hey,
way of being disconnected.
so
yeah,
disconnected.
not bringing So even if you could somehow force elation, we don't really find that we're very connected.
No.
Which it turns out I'm actually way more interested in connection than I am in happiness.
Yeah.
Satisfaction, fulfillment. We'll come back to this, I think, in our follow-up show about how much we've come to value fulfillment, which is not a feeling maybe particularly.
Yeah.
Tricky. We'll come back to
Yeah.
it. So our very last kind of thing we wanted to address are what I call old dribbles, which we've actually talked about quite a bit with the old pain I shared. But even though I've done all this work over many years to live undamned, I still find that there are little pockets of old pain that I hadn't felt. And I now find that I have space for them, that because my life isn't filled with so many dams, that there's actually resources to just feel whatever old feelings come up. And that has provided another thing for me to connect to people around, and has provided clarity for me about my life. And I don't know. Do you want to say anything else about old pains?
I just that it's surprising to me when they come up, because when they do, a lot of the times it is from so long ago and about things that I didn't really know affected me.
Yes, very good.
I want to commiserate with people who might think that there's so much pain that it's just going to be an endless process. But that really hasn't been my experience.
Me neither.
Being open.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Me neither. And I don't think I've talked about her on the show before, but my best girlfriend these days is in her 70s. And she still finds pockets of old pain. And, she is, I'm not going to say happy about it. Like sometimes she's like, seriously, I'm this old.
Yeah.
And there's still this really weird old pain. But she's also, it has helped me be reconciled with it. This is just part of what there is. Maybe especially for those of us who lived with too much pain or too many dams or problematic ways of feeling our feelings. But it's been inspiring to me to see her be able to walk through that. Okay, well, we will come back to definitely some of these topics next week. Please, we invite you to connect with us with any requests for clarification or questions you might have about today's show for our follow-up episode. But that is all for now. Thank you. I really, truly thank you so much for joining us. As I already said today, it looks to us as though our community could really use this content, and we are excited to create and share it. If you already like what you're hearing, or even if you don't, but you think what we're up to is good, please consider contributing through Patreon at patreon.com/C12POD. That's C12POD. And support us by subscribing to our show through whichever tool you use to listen to podcasts, and submit a review on iTunes and Facebook or wherever you listen to the show. We're hosting Discord spaces for patrons, and we'll include a Dear Citizen segment in future shows, so support us and write in with questions about practicing the principles of the steps. Everyone is invited to please find us online, chime in, and write to us. We're on Instagram, Facebook, SoundCloud. I'm now hearing all these tools for damning. SoundCloud and Twitter, all at C12POD. Thank you to everyone who contributes to this work.
Thank you.